This is Robert Stearns. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in. I really believe that learning is one of the greatest joys in life. And one of the greatest ways to learn is simply to have meaningful conversations, both with those who come from a similar background as yours, as well as those whose background might be very different. So my hope is that as we connect and converse with leaders from all around the world, that we will learn and grow together. If you're new with us, hit the subscribe button and we'll deliver the new episodes to you right away. So wherever you are, on a run, in the car, at the kitchen table with some coffee, welcome to the conversation. And good evening, good Thursday evening, brothers and sisters, friends, ladies and gentlemen from all across America, around the world. Sign in, everybody. Tell us who you are, where you're watching from. If it's your first time, say first time so we can give you a special greeting. Great to have you tonight. And it's great to be together today. I pray that you're doing well. I want to tell you something. About 17 years ago, a courageous young rabbi from Long Island, before it was kosher for Christians and Jews to cooperate together, before any of this kind of conversation was happening, there was a courageous young rabbi named Rabbi Jonathan Muskat. And he was from Oceanside, Long Island, and he reached out to me and he said, listen, we're hearing about you Christians who support Israel, you Christians who love the Jews and appreciate the Jewish roots of the Christian faith. And he said, would you consider coming and speaking at my synagogue? Now, I want to tell you, I'm trying to remember, it may be, I think it might be the second synagogue or the third that I ever spoke at in my whole life. Now, Baruch Hashem, I've had the great honor and privilege of speaking at synagogues all across America and all around the world. Well, that courageous rabbi was our guest this evening, and we are so thrilled to be making a reconnection with this amazing rabbi of Young Israel of Oceanside. He's been there for 16 years. He has 5 children and several grandchildren. He was an attorney prior to being a rabbi. That's got to make board meetings very interesting at your synagogue. Wow, look at the room fill up. We've got folks in from all over the place tonight. Folks, you've got one job. I need you to do it right now. Everybody, hit the share button. Share. Blow the shofar by hitting the share button. That helps our Facebook algorithms, because we're going to make Mark Zuckerberg a Christian Zionist one way or the other. Hey, Mark, we're glad you're tuning in tonight. So hit the share button, everybody, and let's get the message of Jerusalem-based Christianity, this great cooperation, this great friendship between Christians and Jews. Let's get it out there by hitting the share button. So it was all those years ago that I had the privilege of meeting my friend who I've reconnected with, and I'm going to introduce you to momentarily. But he was an attorney. He has a degree, can you believe this, in medieval Jewish history. Boy, that's got to be some intense reading to read about medieval Jewish history. I think there's some heroes, and I think there's a lot of painful anecdotes in the Middle Ages. And that's why we rejoice in this new level of cooperation, this era that has dawned upon us of friendship between Jews and Christians and the rebirth of the state of Israel. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, hit the share button, share, like us on YouTube, go to Instagram and follow me, follow on my public figure page. My private page is all filled up and I don't post on it anyway. And now, to get to this week's amazing edition of Bishop and the Rabbi, help me welcome all the way from Oceanside, Long Island, Rabbi Jonathan Muskat. Rabbi, great to have you. There you are.
Great to be speaking with you. Great to reconnect with you after all these years.
It has been far too long, my friend. It's been far too long. But you know, there's that beautiful Yiddish word. If you can't figure out a word to say, go to Yiddish, because Yiddish has got it. And the word is beshert, right? It's like
Beshert.
when the timing is right, it happens. So
Correct.
we've been separated for a long time, but it's a beshert moment. And how are you? How is your community? How's your beautiful family? Tell us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, it's great to reconnect with you. You are a true friend of the Jewish people, a true friend of Israel. It's wonderful to reconnect. Thank God our synagogue is doing very well. It's obviously been challenging for many synagogues because of the pandemic. But I think that when you have a synagogue that has a strong mission, a strong set of values, then as soon as it is medically comfortable, medically clear to come back. And then we've been doing for during the pandemic. There were times we did a lot of things on Zoom when we weren't able to come back to the synagogue. But as soon as we were medically cleared, there was a tremendous thirst to return, because if you have core values, and that's what ultimately brings people together. So then we come back. And thank God, Baruch, as you said so well, Baruch Hashem.
Well, that is beautiful, Rabbi. And let me just ask you. I'm going to go out on a limb here and just ask you. You know, I'm not kidding. When you invited me to speak at your synagogue, this was a courageous act on your part. I mean, today the phenomenon of Christian support for Israel is much better known. Thank God, the past 20 years have borne good fruit of this work, of this friendship, this cooperation. But you were really going out on a limb, and you know, what does it mean for you you're an Orthodox rabbi, so you don't, how do I say that? You know, you come at things from a very grounded perspective. How is it for you to see this friendship that has grown between the Jewish and Christian community over the past few decades?
Listen, I think if there is what to connect with, that there's an alliance of values. So there are differences in terms of some of our beliefs, and but I think there are many things that connect us, especially in a world where religion in the public square is becoming less and less and less, and perhaps one of the greatest dangers facing our communities is really a lack of faith at all and moral relativism. And I think the idea of having grounded values and having allies where we can find ways to connect, I think that that's a wonderful thing.
Well,
And so,
absolutely. Beautifully said. And we don't have to completely agree on everything to find wonderful things to agree on and to cooperate on. And that's the beauty of friendship. You know, the book of Proverbs says that one man sharpens another. Friends should sharpen each other. They should help, you know, great conversation and growth to take place.
correct. We also
Well,
made,
fantastic.
yeah, I just want to also let you know, thank God we made I have 3 married children. I made 2 COVID weddings. So it was interesting. I made 1 COVID bar mitzvah and 2 COVID weddings. So it was interesting. Some bumps along the road, but again, when there's a will, there's a way, and God helps.
Now, Rabbi, someone's telling me that I'm mispronouncing your name, that it's Yonatan, not Jonathan.
I wrote on my screen Jonathan, or the truth is in Hebrew it's Yehonatan, but either way is fine. Jonathan is fine. Either way, Yehonatan, Jonathan, either way is fine. We're good.
All right. You know, there's always a few adding and taking away of letters in a lot of the biblical names.
Correct.
By the way, like the one that we're going to study tonight. Tonight, folks, we're turning in our Bibles to really one of the most epic, extraordinary parshas. It really becomes the turning point of history. We come to Lech Lecha, Genesis chapter 12, where Hashem is speaking to Avram. He's not yet Avraham. He is still Avram. And the voice of God comes to Avraham. Avraham lives in Ur of the Chaldees. Remember that there is no such concept as monotheism at the time. There was only polytheism. And in the midst of this cacophony of all of these gods and all of these, you know, forces of nature and all that was happening, I think there was a lot of moon worship, if I remember right, in Ur. That was one of the main gods in the neighborhood. In the middle of all of this, somehow in Avram's heart, in his mind, in his nefesh, in his soul, he hears the voice of Hashem. He hears one voice that penetrates through all the noise and grips his heart. And that voice says to him those words, Lech lecha, Avram, get up and go. Where, God? Where am I supposed to go? Oh, you're on a need-to-know basis. I'll tell you as you go. I'll tell you as you journey. And Abraham began the journey of faith that in many ways, everyone on this call tonight and those who will see it in the future, we are all still fulfilling Abraham's call. Rabbi, honestly, you scored the jackpot. This is a great parsha to share with tonight. So bring us some thoughts from this amazing parsha, Lech Lecha.
I think you said it so eloquently. Avraham, he answered the call, he felt the mission, and he never wavered. And that's the key to true faith. True faith is not to waver even when things get tough. You titled, I think, this session tonight, The Famine, because God tells Abraham, as you said so well, a need-to-know basis, and that's really the key. In other words, God promised Abraham, I'm going to make you great, make you famous. You think, oh, it's great, it's wonderful, but what does this mean? Right? God tells him nothing, and he ventures, he follows exactly whatever God tells him to do. And as soon as he gets there, what happens? There's a famine in the land. And like you can imagine, Abraham thinking to himself, what's going on here? He promised me wonderful things. He promised me that I would inherit this land. And immediately after I get there, what happens? I have to leave. And yet, Abraham never wavers. And in fact, there's a foil. There's a foil as a character, as the foil, that's his nephew Lot. Because Abraham goes with his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot, and there's some indication where Abraham thinks, or maybe the reader, when he reads this, we all know that after Abraham, Isaac takes over for him. But if it's the first time reading this book, you think maybe Lot's going to continue his mission. He's the nephew. Right. And what happens? They go down to Egypt, and as soon as the famine is over, they return from Egypt. And then the shepherds of Lot and Abraham begin to quarrel. And Abraham and Lot decide to split up. And what happens? The Torah tells us that Lot sees there's that area called Sodom and Amorah. And those are known as cities where there's people who are obviously behaving badly. Those are like the key cities of bad behavior. But what does Lot see? Lot says, oh, it's very fertile there. What does he say? It's Ke'eretz Mitzrayim. It's like the land of Egypt. Because what happened? Abraham and Lot go down to Egypt. They have their core mission. Abraham stays on course, but all Lot sees after he goes to Egypt, he's going after the money. He's going after the fertile land. I don't care that the people of Sodom and Amorah are described as Ra'im v'chata'im l'Hashem Od, that they're considered wicked and sinful. And the key is, this is, as you mentioned, this is the jackpot parsha. This is the Torah portion of faith, where we see the knight of faith not wavering and being on track despite all the little bumps on the road, which is an inspiration for each and every one of us, because we go through challenges, we go through bumps along the road.
And by the way, Rabbi, the bumps were not so little. He really faced. I often will preach, and I'll hold up the Bible, and I'll say, "Show me someone in this book who had an easy life. Show me someone in this book who had an uncomplicated life." To live a life of faith is to live a life of courage, to live a life of bravery, to live a life that goes against the grain of what makes sense only if we're living by our worldly passions. And Rabbi, what I think you're pointing out so lucidly is that Lot was making decisions that were momentarily advantageous. They might have been advantageous financially or in the moment, but they were off mission. Abraham was on a mission, and Lot was content to settle and not worry about the mission.
Right. I
Two
mean,
things. Go ahead,
no,
go for it.
I'm saying sometimes you think about it where, we spend years and years working on something, and will we ever see the fruits of our labor? And one could argue, when Abraham died, and not in this parsha, but what's going to be with his mission? Hopefully it's going to work. He had faith in God, but if we were just to, end his story after he died, okay, so he has one son Yitzchak, one son Isaac. What's going to be? And sometimes you can work and work and work, and you wonder, is it going to pay off? But we see this whole Bible comes from Abraham's heroism. And right, the idea of a mission, as you so eloquently pointed out, it requires hard work. But at the end of the day, with everything, the hard work pays off, again, if it's focused on the mission.
Well, there's so much in this incredible parsha that you're walking us through, and two things that I see about Abraham. When we look at first of all, let me just point out briefly a famous verse that so many Christians have taken to heart, which of course is Genesis 12:3. It says, "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and through you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." And we think about the incalculable gifts that the Jewish people have given the world. We think about, and I'll just reference you as an attorney, you think about the fact that the rule of law, okay, that fills all of the Western world, I mean, it's based on Mosaic law. What we view as the canon of law, it really all goes back to Sinai. It goes back to that encounter moment at Sinai where the law is given. I mean, this is just one of countless sources of inspiration and beauty and power and effectiveness that the Jewish people have given the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's an obvious point, but it's not necessarily so obvious in that you could make the argument that maybe we're supposed to be an insular society. And the answer is no, that our job as Jews, as children of Abraham, is v'nivrachu v'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama, that everyone should be blessed through us. Our job is to teach the world, to be educators for the world, to show them the light of God. We say that in the book of Yitro, when the Torah is about to be given, we are called Mamlechet Kohanim Vogoy Kadosh, a kingdom of priests and holy nation. The whole Jewish people, the entirety of the Jewish people is considered like a Kohen, like a priest, as an intermediary to the world. That our mission is, as we recite in a prayer, each and every day, 3 times a day, there's a prayer that we say at the end of our prayer service called Aleinu. And in this prayer of Aleinu, the first paragraph is more particular, speaking more to us, the Jewish people. And the same time, in the second paragraph, we say litaken olam b'malchut shakai, that our job is to engage in what some people call tikkun olam, to sort of share our visions and our values with the rest of the world. And Abraham, by the way, in this parsha, has a very interesting method of achieving that goal. It's not by force. It's he builds an altar and he calls out in the name of God. He doesn't.
Rabbi, I was
Yeah.
just going to talk about, that was
Okay.
the next point I was going to make is verse
Okay.
7,
Okay.
that there are several points, but over and over again, we see Abraham, and then it's passed on, right, to Isaac and
Right.
Jacob, this concept of building altars, having these moments of, kind of divine encounter, divine promise, divine memorial. And you're telling us, there are other traditions, some religious traditions, and even some non-faith traditions that exert belief system by force. We see things, for example, in North Korea. We see things in China where there's gross human rights abuses, and you're really forced to line up with a certain way of thinking. But Abraham does it differently, Rabbi. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, he does this I mean, he does this by simply calling out in the name of God. There are rabbinic stories that are not actually in the text, but they're rabbinic stories saying that Abraham invited guests to his house, and when people would finish eating, he would encourage them to thank the one who created the food, and that he would lead them to explain to them that they should express gratitude not to him but to God. But what's actually, there's a great story in the text that when his nephew Lot is in the city of Sodom. So there's a war, there's a battle. There are four kings against five kings. Lot is in Sodom, and the city of Sodom is allies itself with four other, I guess, city states, and they wage war against four other city states, and the four city states win, and they capture Lot. And Abraham tries to fight. He gathers his men, and he's a man of peace, but he has to rescue his nephew Lot, and he defeats the four kings. And we have to just pause for a moment, because at that time, when Abraham defeats the four kings, he is now the superpower in the land of Canaan. He is the head. He defeated the four kings who defeated the five kings in this land. And what land is this? This is the promised land that God says, I'm going to give to your descendants, and you're going to father a chosen nation, a nation of ethical monotheism. And think about it. Abraham now had the ability to force this land, which was promised to be to him and his descendants. He could force his religion, his worldview, his religious worldview, which he felt so passionately about, upon the whole land. He had the ability to do that, but that's not his way. And in fact, throughout Jewish history, I think there was one time, one of the there were, in the story of Hanukkah, just we'll come, go there for a second. The last of the Maccabean brothers was Simon, his son John Hyrcanus. During his reign, he forcibly converted the Idumeans from Edom in southern Israel, and that's viewed as a black mark. That was probably the only time in Jewish history where the Jewish people forcibly, the nation forcibly converted another group of people. We do not believe in that, and this is evidenced by this week's parsha. Have faith, have profound faith, unwavering faith, but share it by means of education, and share it with love.
And by means of example,
An
right? By
example,
by
yes,
means of just living it out.
correct.
First of all, I just have to say, what a great room we've got tonight. We have people literally tuned in from all over the nation. If you haven't yet, just sign in, get us your name and the city you're watching from. And everybody help us out. If you haven't yet hit the share button because it's filling the room up for us, and that's wonderful. And just type in your name and where you're watching from. But Rabbi, it's just beautiful that living by example becomes its own advancement of your faith. I'm thinking of a beautiful Christian saying that we have from a famous medieval saint, Saint Francis. And Saint Francis is attributed with saying this: preach the gospel at all times, use words only when necessary.
I hear.
So your life should be your sermon. Your actions should be your sermon. The way you conduct yourself, how you conduct your business, how you treat the stranger on the street, how you interact with your neighbors. This should be the testimony of your faith. The words and the theology are secondary. They're important, but they're secondary. The primary thing is, are you demonstrating the character of your faith in how you live and how you act?
You should know that there are some people that I speak to in my congregation on a somewhat regular basis, and there are a few people who have an objectively challenging life. If you compare their lives to some other people, they have an objectively challenging life. And some of these people have an tremendous sense of faith, and an expression in Hebrew called gamzu latova. This is also for the best. This is what God wills, and therefore they accept whatever happens to them lovingly. And I tell them exactly your point. I don't quote Saint Francis, but I tell them your point, which is, your attitude and your approach to life is probably more effective than 1,000 sermons that I would give on faith, just by watching how you conduct your life and how you live your life under troubling circumstances.
Well, it's absolutely beautiful. Listen, I want to talk before we close tonight. Let's go over, if we can, to this incredible chapter 15. Chapter 15 says this: sometime later, Hashem spoke to Avram in a vision and said, "Do not be afraid. I'll protect you. Your reward will be great." And of course, Avram enters into this dialogue because God keeps promising, and there's no sign of anything. He's got no kids. How is, and he, honestly, Rabbi, he's got to be questioning his sanity. He's got to be questioning, is any of this ever going to come true? And then the Lord in verse 9 says, "Bring me a heifer and a female goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon." And Avram presents these. And then there's this powerful section. It says, "The sun goes down and Avram fell into a deep sleep, and a terrifying darkness came down over him. Then the Lord said, 'You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land where they'll be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I'll punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. As for you, you'll die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age.'" And then this beautiful verse 17, "The sun goes down, darkness falls, and Avram sees a smoking firepot and flaming torch pass between the halves of the carcasses. So the Lord made covenant with Abraham that day." Rabbi, talk to us about the power of God's covenant.
A covenant is binding on both sides. It's binding on the Jews and Abraham's descendants, and it's also binding on God. I want to share a beautiful comment by a great sort of late medieval rabbi, the Maharal, and he asked the following question. And there's a rabbinic tradition that before God called out to Abraham, that Abraham, when he was younger, he started believing in one God and he quarreled against everyone around him. And there are a lot of heroic stories. There's even a miraculous story, according to some traditions, that he was thrown into a fiery furnace and he was miraculously saved. And yet, the Torah is silent. The Torah does not mention any of these stories before, unlike, for example, the Torah tells us by Moses. Torah tells us the early life of Moses. Torah doesn't tell us the early life of Abraham, why he was chosen. And the Maharal explains that the reason why the Torah doesn't tell us why Abraham was chosen, is because it's irrelevant for our purposes. The point is simply that he was chosen. The point is simply that we have a mission. We as Jews are not allowed to abandon our mission, but God cannot abandon the covenant either. And God is telling Abraham in this covenant, regardless, I am with you.
Yeah.
There might be sins, there might be bumps along the road, but I, says God, am never going to abandon you. And sometimes, we can feel in our own lives, we struggle with our faith and we feel that God doesn't love us and we feel that we sin, and we're human beings, so we make mistakes. It's natural when you're a human being to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And there are times we feel closer to God, there are times we feel more distant than God. But one thing's for sure, the covenant that Abraham's children with God will never be broken. And that's the promise in this great parsha.
Absolutely incredible words. Abraham's dream, living out in our time. Everything's happening there. Israel is in the land. His descendants are as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. And Israel is being the Or HaGoyim, the light to the Gentiles. And the word of the Lord is going forth from Zion and from Jerusalem. We live in a day of a reunified Jerusalem. The exiles have come home from 106 nations of the earth. Uh, because of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yehuda, the Hebrew language has been reborn and spoken in our day, in our time. We're living in the time of the fulfillment of the dreams of our father Abraham.
I mean, it's amazing. And in fact, some of the cities that we read about in this week's Parsha, Shechem, we read our Elon Moreh, Beit El, Hebron, right? In Judea, Samaria, are
The heartland.
biblical, the heartland, are biblical cities. This is it. This comes, it's not simply the state of Israel is not simply a response to the Holocaust that some may want to argue.
That's right.
It's not simple. It's connected to what we read today, this Shabbat, and what we're reading about in these coming weeks. It's connected. It's a thousands and thousands of year old history and becoming alive, where people have the opportunity not to merely be bystanders, to actually fulfill and live a dream that people have prayed about for thousands and thousands of years. It's not this is not simply a new dream that some or new vision that some people
Right.
observe. This is returning home. This book tells us that we have returned home, and I truly thank you
Amen.
for your support for this mission and to recognize this great gift that God has given our people and that you're so supportive of it.
Well, it is our privilege and our joy. But folks, you can help us right now in a few ways. Number one, hit the share button. If you've just tuned in, hit the share button. Spread the message. Spread the word. It's a new day in Jewish Christian understanding and cooperation. So be a part of that beautiful conversation and consider helping us as we support Israel and the Jewish people. We have two feeding centers in Israel that we sponsor. One is in Jerusalem and one is on the Sea of Galilee. And you can go to eagleswings.org / donate to learn about our Abraham's Bread feeding centers. We're feeding hundreds of people a week in partnership with a beautiful organization there called Mayor Panim. That is our partner on the ground there. And get involved, do something practical for Israel, do something meaningful for Israel. Make a donation, become a partner. We're so glad you've tuned in to the Bishop and the Rabbi. Now, tomorrow night, 6 p.m., we will go live for 10 minutes for the Shabbat brachot. We'll be welcoming the Shabbat tomorrow night with the brachot, so join us at 6 p.m. Then Sunday morning at thetab.org, we'll be having services here. You can tune in. Every Tuesday at 12, TorahTuesdays.com. There's no cost whatsoever. Hundreds of people studying the Torah together, Jews and Christians, every week with our friend Mark Gerson. So go to TorahTuesdays.com to sign up. Again, totally free, but be a part of this global Bible study that's happening. And indeed, whatever you do, always remember to keep Israel in the center of your heart. Let God use you like he did Abraham. Listen for the voice of God. Follow the plan of God. Make altars. Don't force your beliefs on other people. Live your life in front of them. And know that any dream worth having is a dream that's going to live on beyond you. So hold on to that and live for that. Rabbi, I want to give you the last word tonight. So take it away, the last closing thought.
I think that this Torah portion really tells us about our faith, and I think it tells us that, like what you said, Abraham was tested again and again and again, and I think we need to draw inspiration. We just look at the Bible, look at the Torah portion, look at our biblical histories, study the Torah. Just keep on studying and studying and studying. That's how we derive and nourishment. It's not simply an intellectual exercise, like I know more facts, but you actually can, it's an emotional experience. Maimonides has said that if we study Torah, that we fulfill the mitzvah of loving God, because studying
Mhm.
the Torah is not merely an intellectual experience. It's an emotional experience. It's one that we draw close to God. So I invite everyone in the audience to study Torah, learn Torah, live Torah, and let it pulsate through your veins.
Beautiful, beautifully said, Rabbi. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to all of our friends in Oceanside, from Young Israel in Oceanside, who tuned in, as well as your family. We had several of them on tonight. That was beautiful. Eagles Wings family, Tabernacle family, great to be together tonight. And everybody remember, keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. God bless you, everybody.